Hello. I cannot hear. No. I can't hear. Can't hear. Can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm going to restart my intro since you guys are just looking at my lips moving but not hearing anything. So just give me a moment to just reintroduce you and introduce myself. Sorry, everyone, but technology, what can I say? Um, so, hello everyone. Welcome to another exciting installment of Open Air. Thumbs up if you can hear me, Adrian. Excellent, excellent. I'm Dexter Wemberly, and I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest. A'Driane Nieves was born in San Antonio, Texas in 1982. A visual artist and writer, A'Driane is a U.S. Air Force veteran and the founder of an arts nonprofit and art magazine. She's a self-taught painter for over a decade. At the urging of her therapist, A'Driane began using painting as a form of art therapy in 2011 during her recovery from postpartum depression and following her later diagnosis with bipolar disorder. This initial experimentation led to her using abstract expressionist painting as a way to overcome the impacts of childhood abuse, specifically emotional suppression. Influenced by Joan Mitchell, Cy Twombly, Bernice Bing, and early Black abstractionist painters ranging from Alma Thomas to Mary Lovelace O'Neill, A'Driane's paintings offer space for her own and others' quiet reflection and contemplation. She credits both the writing and visual components of her practice with helping her to find her voice and creating a space for her to safely release long buried emotions. Without further ado, and again, sorry for the first intro, please join me in welcoming A'Driane Nieves to today's open air conversation. Hey, A'Driane, how are you?
Good. Hi, Dexter. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thanks for taking the time. I mean, it's always great that we can use these platforms to talk to people all over the world. But as you can see, sometimes, the technology gods have other plans. So we're
Definitely.
here. We're here. We're ready to get started. So obviously, I just read your biography, and it's filled with a lot of information that we'll start to unpack, talk about other things today. But I just would love for you to just take a moment and just kind of, tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words, just for maybe a minute. Just how do you introduce yourself as a painter, as an artist?
Well, I would say as a painter, as an artist, I would definitely start by just saying, I'm self taught. Next year, I will have been painting for 15 years. I was the kid in seventh grade art class whose teacher was like, you know what, Adrian, it's okay. Don't worry about your still life. I know you feel really bad about it, but don't worry about how it looks. It's okay. You're a theater kid. You do, other performing arts. You don't need to worry about being a visual artist. It's okay. So, that's kind of the background that I come from. I grew up knowing that I was creative. I grew up knowing that I love to write. And so that's how I primarily saw myself. That's primarily the career that I was pursuing. And, painting has just really taken over and dominated much of my life over the last, almost 15 years. So it's something that I feel has given me so many gifts. And it's my hope that when people are experiencing my work and seeing it for the first time or seeing it in person, that they are also receiving some of the same gifts and, if not more, that painting has given me.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that you sort of were experimenting with painting as art therapy earlier on in your career or in your evolution as an artist. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what art therapy actually, even what it is? I mean, I think a lot of people are not even sure what art therapy actually means. So let's start there.
Sure. I think there are different types of art therapy. My introduction to it was my therapist at the time was trying to help me find something constructive to do with my hands because I was experiencing a lot of hypomanic episodes, a lot of anxiety and agitation. And she wanted me to find something to do with my hands when I was having these high intense moments of big emotions and lots of agitation, and I would feel like I wanted to just kind of like crawl out of my skin. She wanted me to find something that I could ground into, and so she started talking to me about a lot of the therapeutic benefits of working with our hands. She started sharing with me a lot of the science and the research that has existed around this topic, and how it's shown that working with your hands, whether it's gardening, whether it's crocheting, whether it's, fixing a car, or if it's, engaging in painting or pottery, how these types of activities have shown to have great physical impacts on the body, but also great cognitive and mental impacts as well. And so that was my introduction to it. She recommended that I try to find something creative to do with my hands that wasn't writing, right? And my first attempt was crocheting. And I remember as a kid, I had one of those little rainbow looms that were really popular back in the early 90s. And I was like, I remember making a pot holder once. Let me try to do that. And I tried that for 2 weeks and gave up because I found it extremely tedious and boring. And it was having the opposite effect. It was only increasing my agitation. It wasn't relieving it. And I remember when I was buying the crochet supplies at the store, on the way to like the yarn and the hooks, I had passed this little small section that had like craft paints and these little particle canvas boards and some brushes. And I remember just it was a very fleeting thought, to just grab some and throw them in my cart. And so I did, and I kept it pushing. And after those 2 weeks of trying to crochet, I remember sitting in my bedroom and I was having a particularly not so great day. And I remember looking up and seeing this bag of painting supplies in the corner. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. And I spent about 45 minutes just, feeling the paint on my hands and not even really even using the brush initially, just kind of pushing the paint around with my hands on the little canvas boards. And I started to notice, that after a while, my body felt calmer, my thoughts weren't racing. I didn't feel like I needed to, like I was just going to break out of my skin. Like I just felt so just relaxed, and my mind was quiet for the first time probably all week. And
Wow.
I was like, wow, maybe my therapist was onto something. So that's really how painting started for me. It really was just a way to manage the symptoms that I was experiencing on the mental health side. And it really became about just being able to release through paint and through the act of just kind of, like I said, using my hands, the sensory wise, that was very beneficial for me, and that's really how it started.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk a little bit about, some of the things that were mentioned in your bio: postpartum depression, bipolar disorder. Not to kind of take a deep dive into that, but I just want to sort of hear a little bit more about how your art reflects your journey going through those things. If someone isn't familiar with experiencing either of those, and they're encountering your work, could you sort of share a little bit about how you explain that connection?
Definitely, I would say that at this stage of my practice, it's probably not as apparent. It's not necessarily at the forefront of my work, so it might not be really the first connection that a viewer would make or would think about. But I think it's more so in the background. It's more so part of the foundation of my work, because that's how I started. But what has remained from that time till now is just still that ability to be able to kind of pour myself fully into what the viewer sees on the canvas, the from the brush strokes to the even the color choices. Everything is very intuitive based, so I rely really heavily on being in the moment, being fully present. And again, those are things that early on in my practice, I really relied on that to help me navigate anxiety and depressive low feelings, and to even help me navigate a lot of the emotional turmoil, like a lot of the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment that I was struggling with and carrying because I was dealing with postpartum depression and I was having troubles connecting with my children, and I was feeling like a terrible mother. Being able to pour all of that into what I was putting onto the canvas, and being able to use that to kind of ground and to stay tethered and not disassociate and to, move through those moments of difficulty, of those moments of very intense emotions. I think that still is very present in my work today, even though it's not necessarily at the forefront.
You mentioned writing, and writers writers tend to be readers, at least I think.
Yes.
And so I'm curious to hear about how you incorporate writing into your painting practice. How does it show up psychologically and also literally, physically in the work? And also some of the authors and writers that are influential to you.
What's really interesting about writing and painting is that for a long time, for uh, the majority of my painting practice, writing was not. Um, I didn't include writing. I wasn't sure how to bring the writing into the visual and how to kind of pair the two. So for a long time, painting was very dominant. There was a period of time where I actually stopped writing altogether, and I was just kind of pouring everything, pouring all of my thoughts, my stories, my ideas, just into painting and letting those things be communicated visually. Every time I tried to integrate writing into my visual practice, it just didn't feel authentic or organic. And I think for a long time it was because for me, writing is a more cerebral activity. Writing is a way for me to process things intellectually, and painting
Mm.
is a way for me to process things somatically in my body and emotionally, right? And so I think for a long time I was just really struggling with how to try to connect these two very different parts of myself, to bring them together in a way that didn't feel forced. And so, I would look at artists like Cy Twombly and see how, he integrated writing into his pieces. And I would always be really intrigued and kind of figure out, like, oh, how did he do that? How did he just feel so free to write on the canvas and not care about what it looked like, not worry if it made sense? Because writing just for a long time would just get me very much in my head, and when I'm painting, I'm in my body. So it's a very different experience for me. So I really struggled with that. I would say about 2 to 3 years ago, it started to slowly come together. And what I would do is initially is I would write phrases or I would write sentences on the canvas, and then I would completely cover them up. So I have a lot of early works that have tons of words, phrases, sentences underneath them, and no one would ever know because there's so many layers of paint on top of them. They're completely obscured. And then the more comfortable I became with doing that, the more comfortable I became with allowing more of the text to be seen. And so that's where, I would maybe do a base layer of paint, write a word or a sentence, and then maybe only paint over part of it. And I would leave some of it still to be seen. So it has taken some time, but it's something that I needed it to feel organic and not forced. And in terms of reading, man, I read so many things. I read a lot of information. I like to go down a lot of rabbit holes. So I do a lot of research around topics that interest me, especially if they're related to, like identity, trauma, epigenetics. But also more recently, I've been doing serious deep dives on neurodivergence and somatics and the topic of like emotionality. I've even been getting into some of the things that my husband is really passionate about, emotional learning, machine learning, understanding how the body and its systems work, how our emotional frameworks are made up, our synapses. Though I get into very like very very nerdy type of research, but I enjoy it. And then the most recent reading that I've been doing, I've been kind of doing this. re-education for myself of by reading texts by Black writers, especially Black feminist writers. So June Jordan, Sonia Sanchez, Audre Lorde, um, James Baldwin, of course. These are all authors who, I didn't read them. I didn't have the benefit of like a college course, like a women's studies course or an African American studies course to expose me to these authors. And so I've been
Mhm.
doing a lot of my own research and kind of going through their work, listening to their interviews, Toni Morrison even, and just taking my time and learning. About their work and learning about the issues that they're discussing, and then using their work to kind of challenge my own understanding about where I stand on the same issues, or allowing them to really expand my worldview, and that has been finding its way into my work as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, switching gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, as a self-taught artist, I'm sure you've had a very, for lack of a better word, interesting journey. Entering into the professional art world, and at a time right now where there's all of this talk about whether the art world is contracting or expanding, and everyone has their opinions on all of this. For the artists that are joining us today, and I'm quite sure there are, can you share a little bit about like how you got your foot in the door? You know, and what that looks like for you, where you are now. But I mean, you've been showing internationally. You probably won't say these things about yourself, but your career has pretty much been on fire for the past few years. I mean,
Yes.
you've been showing all over the world. I mean, we even did a project together. You were in an exhibition I curated in Tokyo earlier this year. So how'd you get
Yes.
your foot in the door with these galleries, and what's that like?
It's really interesting. I did not decide to pursue art as a career until I had been painting for about almost 5 years. And so I started painting in 2011. I didn't decide to pursue art as a career until November of 2015. And that first, I would say, 2 to 3 years after making that decision, I went through so much rejection. It honestly, many times it felt impossible. I wasn't getting any shows. I wasn't getting attention from curators. I even locally, in the cities where I was living in initially in Pennsylvania, and then in Austin, Texas, and even when we moved to San Jose, I was doing any and everything I could to try to share about my work online, so definitely using Instagram as a tool for that. But then also, I was constantly submitting my work to calls for art. Just constantly. Any call for art that I felt my art might be a good fit for, or sometimes even if I didn't think I stood a chance, I was just submitting. Just submitting. I think in those, first 2 to 3 years, I approached close to 300 rejections. um I was sending out, I think I had a goal of every month of sending out at least 10 submissions. And so I was just building that muscle. I would try to find ways to get involved with the local art scene. But yeah, there were no curators or gallerists, emailing me, knocking down my door. I was even told a few times that my work was not mature enough, my work was not interesting enough. Especially this was during the time where Trayvon Martin had been killed. We were dealing with Eric Gardner's death, right? And we're doing a lot of police brutality. And very distinctly remember having a curator give me feedback on my submission and say, now is not the time for abstraction. There's nothing abstract about what we are experiencing as Black people, and so there's just no room for this. And so those are just examples of some of the things that I experienced early on. Um, I would say it wasn't until around 2020 and 2021 when I started to get more attention, a little bit more visibility. And I had one, I had a dealer reach out to me, who was also a collector, and he had seen my work on Instagram. He really liked it, and he wanted to buy a couple of pieces. And initially, I was like, "Is this a scam?" I was like, I don't know. I have to research you first. Because I was like, I don't know. But it turned out it wasn't a scam. He was legit. And, thanks to him, he put in some work in terms of, showing my work to some of his own contacts, reaching out to some of the people that he knew and who were gallerists, who were curators, and saying, hey, you should really take a look at her work. And, one in particular, she was just starting her gallery in Paris. And she was like, okay, well, I'm getting ready to do an art fair. Let's give her a shot. And she will readily say that initially she was just kind of like, she was kind of like this about the work. And when the work that they were taking to the art fair arrived in Paris, and she saw it in person, she said, whoa, wait a minute, this is okay. Okay, I get it. And that won her over. And she, from then on, I mean, it's been almost 4 years now that I've been working with her, and her co-founder. And they were the first ones to show my work internationally. And they were the first ones to kind of say, hey, yes, you're an American artist, but you can think bigger than that. You can be a global artist. You don't have to just stick to America. And so I have to be honest in saying that, really showing internationally has been a game changer for me on this front, and for my career. It has opened up so many doors. It has brought my work to uh, different countries, different audiences, and that's been really incredible to experience. So I'm really grateful for that. But early on, I mean, really, up until 4 or 5 years ago, it was it was tough. I was hustling, and I was um, getting some opportunities, some invitations here and there, but definitely not at the level that I've seen over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, well, there's so much that makes me think of. Well, one is I'm curious to know what kept you going. So that's one thing
Mm.
I'd love to sort of ask you. The other thing is, um, it's it's great that you had this sort of system in place. It mirrors exactly what I've said to so many artists. So it's good to hear that it's not just my opinion, and I'm certainly not crazy. What I've said to people over and over again, you have to get to a point, and this is for someone who's building their career, not someone who's already
Mhm.
like super established. If you're building your career and you haven't gotten the opportunities that you want, you have to get to a point where you are sending out so many emails and so many proposals and answering so many calls and applying to so many residencies and grants like every month, to the point where the response doesn't even matter anymore. Like you
That
have to
part.
get to a point where just right, you're just, look, I'm sending out 10 or 12, whatever it is, every single month to make sure that I hit that number. And then you know what? When you get a yes from someone, you may not even remember that you applied to it. Like that's the other thing. Like it's
Yeah.
so you basically remove the pain of rejection by
Yes.
applying to so many things, or not just applying, but proposing so many things that if when someone says no, you just say, okay, great, on to the next, and just kind of keep it going. Because when you put all your eggs in one basket as an artist, and I can say this even as a curator, because I practice what I preach. I send out exhibition proposals, sometimes unsolicited, to galleries and museums. I mean, thankfully, I've reached a point where I get more yeses than nos. So that's a good, I guess, a good place to be. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I still get no's, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
and and no's don't, like, it really doesn't affect me, certainly the way it would have affected me 10 years ago.
Right.
um, because I feel like the no's are just built in. It's just
They're
built
just
in. I
built
mean,
in.
you like what it would be actually not great if everyone said yes to everything.
Right.
Um,
I think the other thing about no's is that they help you refine and clarify what your goals are and what you're actually trying to do. They help you get really clear on what your North Star is and what it is that you actually like, what type of career you want to have. You know, like they're great guardrails, I've found.
Right, right, and also something you pointed out about this I think dealer collector you mentioned who reached out to you on Instagram. The importance of allies, right? Like the importance of
Yes.
having people who are willing to go to bat for you and make introductions is like can't be overstated. It's so critically
Yes.
important. Um, yeah, and it's wild what that curator said to you. Now is not the time for abstraction. That's like really funny. Um, so anyway, let's get to my first question, which was like, how did you deal with all of that rejection? Like, what kept you going?
Well, one thing that kept me going, which you pointed out, is just having built that muscle, building that muscle, and just reminding myself that sometimes it's not even about the actual opportunity. It's just about the exercise of putting myself out there, getting comfortable with doing that, and just like practice, right? It's just like going out every day and shooting, at the staying at the free throw line and shooting the ball and trying to get into the hoop, right? So that was one kind of just reframing what I thought about rejection. Two, understanding that, or trying to understand that it could help me refine and clarify my goals and help me really kind of identify, what it was that I was actually going after. And then, to be honest, for a while, what kept me going was just being like, you know what? I don't want gallery representation. Like, once I stopped chasing that and really just focused on, you know what? I don't need a middleman. I can just keep selling my work myself. I can open a gallery space myself, which I did, right? For 2 years, I showed my art in, the gallery space that my nonprofit ran. And, so kind of just being independent and staying that way and learning to be okay with that. And just also being really focused on learning the business of being an artist uh, kept me going. Um, and then also the other thing that kept me going was learning about the history of abstraction and learning about other Black and Brown women artists who have been working in abstraction for decades, learning about them, learning about their work as artists, but also as community workers, and how they were advocates and worked, to kind of serve other artists like Bernice Bing, Howardina Pendell, right? Like she was an artist, but she also had a day job, right?
Right.
Um, and so kind of learning about them and looking to them, looking to the foremothers and kind of seeing how they navigated, and then really pouring myself into um, trying to find ways to celebrate them and honor them and thank them, and also find ways to create opportunities and resources for other artists like myself, especially those who are self-taught and who don't necessarily have the benefit of having gone to art school and having that built-in network, right? To support your career, or give you access to opportunities once you graduate. So I really poured myself into advocacy work. My background as a mental health advocate really translated well into this, and then also to just kind of being like, I'm okay. I'll be independent for a while. That really kept me going as well.
And you mentioned how showing internationally has been a game changer for you, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, as I mentioned myself earlier, you and I, um, worked together on an exhibition that I organized earlier earlier this year in Tokyo. What are some of the other cities you've shown in internationally, whether it's
I've
art
shown in
fairs or exhibitions?
Yes, so I've shown in Art Basel in Switzerland. I've shown at Frieze London. I've also shown in London with another smaller gallery, woman owned, focused on women artists. Shown in Paris, Germany, in Berlin. Where else have we shown? Tokyo this year, Hong Kong, I've shown there twice, Shanghai. Actually, this November will be my fourth year in a row showing in Shanghai at their Art 21 art fair. Where else have I shown? I think what's coming up next is a project in South Africa in Cape Town. Um, Potentially Mexico City, I think. And I am actually, my first institutional exhibition is happening next month in Dijon at Lake Consortium Museum. So that's very exciting. So yeah, I mean, just internationally, it has just been really incredible and very such an expansive thing to experience at this stage of my career, and really, it's really opened up my practice as well. And it's I don't know, it's being able to think bigger. It's opened that up for me. So
That's the I think that's the key. Yeah, and we, obviously you just mentioned Germany, and I didn't mention it earlier. That was the other project you and I worked together. Well, one of the projects we worked together on in Berlin, which would have been last April. Wow, time is just flying.
it's
So
flying.
anyway, what's key to me is that you kind of thought about how your work could be accepted and applicable to audiences around the world, as opposed
Mhm.
to only thinking about the United States, and and to be more clear or more specific, only thinking about, black and brown audiences, but really thinking that there is a bigger audience for the kind of work that you're doing.
Right.
And I think that's like a big part of the success that you've been experiencing, that your work, I think, really does translate well. Everyone kind of can see something different and experience a different emotion your work. So I believe we do have some images. Um, we normally do, and, and we can get those queued up. But I wanna. So here's what we normally do. You can just share 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a little bit about the work, and then I'll ask you some
Mhm.
specific questions. Probably the easiest way to do that.
Okay.
So we'll start here.
This Yeah, so this piece was part of my solo show in Los Angeles at various small fires back in February. This show was, I mean, sorry, this piece was actually the first uh, time that I ever just had a painting that was all text or all just line work, as opposed to, like these heavy blocks of color or condensed blocks of color. And so this very specifically is referencing a very specific experience and memory from my childhood that has to deal with handwriting, specifically learning how to write cursive. And so I wanted this piece to look like one of my old practice sheets. But instead of it being in like black and white, I wanted to have the graphite, have the white, so that it still looks like paper and pencil, but I wanted to add color. So I used different colors to kind of add in lines and marks and even words that I felt were appropriate.
And do you still complete works in one sitting, or is that sort of like changed?
No, I generally do. I will say for one of the works that I'll have in my show in Dijon next month, that one actually took me 3 days, but that was it's a 36-foot piece. It's unstretched. I was working on it in my driveway, and I only had a limited amount of time each day to work on it. But generally, usually, it's very rare that I work on a piece and have to come back to it. Usually, if I'm working on something and I get stuck, or it's not, I can tell pretty quickly if it's not working. And, I leave it and put it to the side or paint over it and start again. But it's very rare that I have to come back to a work.
Well, well, obviously, the pros of completing a work in one sitting is that you kind of know what you have almost
Hmm.
in real time.
Yes.
It perhaps stops you from overworking a painting as well, because we have
Yes.
physical limitations. But I'm glad you brought up that 36-foot work, because I remember seeing, I think on Instagram, you were walking on showing the canvas or something in your driveway, and I'm thinking to myself, I really hope you're not going to try to complete that painting in in one sitting. There
No,
definitely are
physically, no,
some.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's like that would be a marathon. You'd be up for like 3 days. Like
No.
diminishing returns. So let's go to the next image. So
Ooh.
this work is something I was thinking about when we were talking about writing and incorporating it into your practice. So please share a bit about this painting.
So this painting actually started after Trayvon Martin's death, after his murder, and it started as a sketch in my sketchbook. And it was just a black background with red and white paint. That I used, I applied with a paper towel, and I kept that sketch for years. And I always wanted to paint it bigger, and I finally had the opportunity to do so for this solo with VSF back in February. And only this time uh, I wanted to kind of create the next evolution of it. And so that's where I thought about adding text to it and kind of using a sentence or a statement that I felt like encapsulated my perception of life here in the United States post 2020. And I wrote that sentence, and I approached a neon fabricator in Kingston, New York, Light Bright Neon. They are amazing. I love them. And I said, hey, I have this idea. I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to rely on your expertise to tell me how it can be done. But, I want to put neon text. I want to put neon on a painting. So like Mary Weatherford, but I want it to be text. And that was the start of what has become a very fruitful collaborative relationship. And this piece is some of the first fruits of that.
And what has the response been to this, the sort of incorporating the neon into the canvas?
Pretty strong, I would say. There are, of course, some people who, looked at it and were like, meh, or, who felt that maybe it was a little too on the nose. But overall, very strong response. And this was the first piece that I did. But I just had another neon painting on view at the Armory, and that piece as well. I would say probably had an even stronger response. So people are definitely intrigued by it, and people bring up Mary Weatherford as a reference, but they say but we haven't or Tracy Emin, and they're like, but we haven't really seen text and painting like put together in one. So I think people are definitely intrigued. Um, and I enjoy it. I like it. To me, it feels like a very organic way to give text and my writing a life of its own and a form of its own, and a way for it to hold its own with painting. So I enjoy doing this.
Let's move to the next image, and my it's funny. It's great for people to offer feedback, but I often just encourage artists to always remember, if you ask someone their opinion, they're gonna give you one. Doesn't
Right.
mean it's a good opinion. It
Right.
doesn't mean it's a good opinion.
That is true.
Um,
That is true.
yes. So great. So same thing. You can share a bit about this work.
Yeah. So this piece is really inspired by two things. One, Alice Walker's poem "Womanish," and in that poem, in the book. In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, there's this poem "Womanish," and in it, she mentions how she talks about how she compares womanism and feminism, and purple and lavender, and so that's where the idea for the base came from. I've also been doing a lot of gardening in my own personal life, and so the gardening theme is there. This piece is also connected to like my ancestry and my lineage. My great grandmother was a gardener as well, and when my great aunt, when she passed, or right before she passed, she was talking with my mother in hospice, and I come from a family of artists of varying disciplines, and she looked at my mom and she said, who's gonna tend to the garden? There's so many talents and so many gifts in this family, and who's gonna take care of the garden? What are y'all gonna do about the garden? And those words resurfaced for me as I was thinking about working on this piece. And so it's an homage to the matriarchs in my family. It's an homage to my newfound gardening obsession, but it's also definitely influenced by texts by Alice Walker.
So I wanna ask you about your choices of colors. Well, since I know we have several more images, in the interest of time, I want to get the next image up. But I want to ask you about your choices of colors. Do you find yourself moving to the same sort of palette, or are you always trying to incorporate different colors into your work? So that's the first question. Then I have a follow up.
Okay. I would say, especially when it comes to base colors, it's all very intuitive for me. The people at the Sherwin-Williams store close by, they know me quite well because I'm always going in there looking at the paint chips, and saying, "Hey, I'll take a gallon of this. Just give me a quart of that. I don't know if I'm gonna like that yet." But I like going into the store and seeing the range of options, and then I just kind of intuitively I gravitate towards what pulls me. I'm intrigued by contrasts, but color use is never premeditated for me. It's really spontaneous, in the flow, in the moment. Now there are colors that I do consistently use. Deep dark reds, dark blues, but then there are more newer ones that have been showing up more recently, are like different shades of green, which I stayed away from for so long early in my practice. So I'm finding that pretty interesting.
And so my follow-up question has to do with titles. I find that titles are a very interesting way to express ideas about a work, from the artist's perspective. I mean, there are many abstract painters who simply, and it's like the bane of my curatorial existence is when everything is untitled. Um, it's just like, which painting are you referring to? Oh, the untitled one that's green or the untitled one that's gray. But
Right.
anyway, um, uh, so how do you land on titles? What's your thought process around titling your work?
So one thing for me with titles is titles can feel stressful at times, like because there's sometimes I feel a lot of pressure with titles. But again, it's really intuitive for me. I was actually just telling this to uh, uh, my gallery manager, who's helping with the show in Dijon, because I needed to title the works for that show, and I hadn't done so yet. And so I was telling her, I was like, "Look, I know you need the titles, but you're gonna have to give me some time because I need them. I need them to surface." And they have to be organic. Now, I will say, in defense of the untitled, sometimes I'm just completely tapped out and I can't think of anything and nothing surfaces. So if I reach that point, that's when I'll hit an untitled. But I try to number them. I try to keep them numbered. But outside of that, it really is, song lyrics, um, titles of books that I've been reading, sentences or phrases that stick out to me when I'm reading different materials, memories, um, declarations, things that maybe I only keep in here, but I don't actually verbally say out loud. Um, that's really where they come from, and they really are a way for me to um, help people have some context. I want people to have their own experiences with their work and pull their own, personal things from it. But I do like using titles as a way to help contextualize and frame things, especially when I'm trying to communicate around a particular idea, or I'm trying to let people know what has informed the work. So, for example, I have works that, titles that mention James Baldwin or Alice Walker, or certain names. I try to point people towards the influences, because I do believe it is important to cite your sources. So the titles are one way that I can do that.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I want to go to the next image, and I think we have two more after that because we're coming down to our final 10 minutes. So let's spend some time on this work here. And what a title!
It's definitely one of my longest, but it really, gardening is uh, a big influence here. I have found personally that gardening has been helping me channel a lot of the grief and anger and rage, and just a lot of the things that I haven't really been able to um, process emotionally over the last few years. My family and I, we have been navigating the pandemic largely in isolation due to our own health and risk profiles. And so we've experienced a big loss of community, and it's really difficult navigating public spaces, with the erosion of public health practices here in the United States. And so there's also, there's just so much that we are witnessing globally around the world. And all of my personal feelings about that, I have been um, oddly enough, um, pouring into gardening. And I've been finding it so cathartic and therapeutic. And so that's where the inspiration really for this piece came from. And that's where the title comes from as well.
And where was this work shown, or will it be shown? I know it's 2024, so it's a fairly recent work.
Yes, it was actually just shown at the Armory Fair.
Okay, great, great. And
Yeah.
what scale is this work, roughly?
This is 64 by 72 inches.
Is that kind of generally the scale you like to work at? I mean, I'm curious because I always feel like an artist's height, like the length of your arms, oftentimes will
Yes.
have a lot of effect on the scale that you want to work in.
Yes, I will say this size tends to be one of the ones that I'm most comfortable with. I do like to work bigger. I find it really difficult to work smaller, to be quite honest with you. I find that to be more of a challenge, but I think that's just because so much of my actual painting process is it's a full body exercise and experience. So a lot of movement is involved, a lot of like stimming is involved. There's I'm playing music, so working big really helps me kind of just take up space and flow really well. So working smaller is more of a challenge than working bigger at this stage.
You just brought up something I want to talk about. So let's go to the next image, and I'll ask you this question. So, it seems like most of the times when I see images of you actually painting, you're listening to music. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Like, not necessarily what are you listening to, because I'm sure it's something different every time. But what role does music play in your creative process?
Music is something that has always been with me. My earliest memories are of, hearing Prince playing, out of my dad's speakers. I grew up a Prince fan. I've been in the Purple Army all of my life. My mom said that when I was two, I was singing When Doves Cry. My music is just so integral to my foundation as a creative person to begin with. I've relied on music all of my life to help me move through different experiences. When I'm listening to music, I see different movements, I see different colors. Music also helps me get grounded and connected to my body, especially if I'm struggling with feeling embodied and connected to my own body. And when I'm painting, music helps me unlock memories. It helps me unlock not just memories, but the feelings, the emotions that are associated with those memories, or maybe a particular time period of my life. And then also, music just helps me synthesize and process because, I can move my body, and that movement, that physical act of moving my body helps me process and synthesize information, stimuli that I'm receiving from my external environment. It kind of all plays a role. But music is definitely central to that. It helps with the flow of things in many ways.
Thank you for sharing that. So the work we're looking at now
Mhm.
isn't a painting,
It's
and
not.
so curious to hear how you arrived at making sculpture, and you can tell us a bit about this specific work.
Yes, so this was also, like I said, in my solo show back in February with VSF, and originally it was not going to be a sculpture. I thought that maybe it would be like attached to the wall, but the more that I started talking with Light Bright Neon about it, they mentioned that, visually what they saw was, my paintings on the walls, and but uh these words kind of being on this see-through stand, and being able to read the words but also see through them to see the work behind them. And when they brought that up, I really loved that juxtaposition of being able to see the writing but also the paintings through it, behind it. And I thought that that was just such a wonderful juxtaposition of these two parts of me and two aspects of my creative practice. And so I was like, yeah, let's try out the stand. So it is my first sculpture. I don't know when I'll do another one because it is very delicate. We had to repair it twice before the show opened. So it was definitely a learning experience, but it's actually one of my favorite pieces that I've ever done. I'm really proud of it, and I love it. It's a favorite. Oh no, you went out. I can't hear you again.
You know, that's
Oh, there you
that's
go.
just me. That's just me trying to stop the airplane that decided to fly over, or
Oh,
helicopter. I'm not
okay.
sure what. It just, it never happens. Only now.
Of course.
So anyway, we have two more images that I'd love to get to,
Okay,
and I have a couple of final questions for you.
sure. So this is one of those pieces where, I really wanted to make sure that there was text that could be seen. And so, it says, no one told me liberation comes with such tender bruising. And I really wanted parts of that to be seen, but I also wanted parts of it to be obscured. And I wanted it to feel very bodily, and a little bit like a bruise, but also like this softness. So this is actually another one of my favorite pieces. I'm so sad it sold. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
it, to be
talk,
honest.
talk,
I
talk
wish I
about,
had kept it.
yeah, talk about that. I mean, maybe this is a good like final like question or two the relationship you have with your work. I mean, you just said, "Oh, I'm so sad it's sold," which I'm sure for a lot of artists be like, well, sell everything. But I mean, but I know, I'm being sarcastic. I mean, I understand that artists do have a relationship with their work that's beyond the commercial value of the work. But can you talk
Right.
about that from your perspective?
Yes, I will say two things about that. So one, if you are, a young artist, an emerging artist, if you are still building your career, save some work that's just for yourself. That's a piece of advice that I would give to myself even just like 3 years ago. There are works that I have sold because I had, certain financial goals or, certain career goals that I was trying to hit that, I looking back, I wish I would have held on to. So that's number one. This is one of those pieces. I wish I would have kept it for myself instead of uh, putting it up for exhibition. I mean, I'm glad that it sold. It went to a great home. I'm grateful for the money that I was able to make from it, but it's a piece that still lives deep in the recesses of my heart. So, I don't always feel that way about every piece. There are some pieces that I don't understand, and I look at them and I'm like, did this come from? They unnerve me, and I'm like, God, get them out of here. But then there are others that they kind of climb into my heart, and it's sometimes hard to see them go. I will say that my husband is much, much more emotionally tied to my work than even I am. He's always like, "Wait, where's that going? Who's getting it?" He's very protective, and he'll be like, "Oh, no." He sometimes, reminds me of the Fred Sanford, like, "Oh, oh, what do you mean it's going?" He gets very like worked up. So, but yeah, not every piece is like that for me, but sometimes they are, and this is an example of one.
Well, since we lost a minute or so in the beginning, we'll probably have a couple more minutes before we wrap up today. But
Okay.
let's go to the next image. And then I have a question that came in. So obviously, there will be people who are interested in your work. Should they sort of DM you and you can direct them to the gallery? Well, like, how does someone go about collecting your work?
Well, right now I work primarily with two galleries. So there's various small fires in Los Angeles primarily, and they also have locations in Texas and in Seoul and South Korea. But then also Gallery Margot, who is in Paris. So I would say they actually do have works that are available right now. So I would reach out to either of them. You could also email me or reach out to me on Instagram, and I can direct you accordingly.
Well, thank you so much, Adrian. It's a fantastic painting that's on screen now. I guess
Thank you.
as a final, maybe you could share something about this work, and then I'll do my closing remarks. But I want to just thank you in advance for your generosity today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I would say this piece here is actually another favorite. I'm not like emotionally tied to it, but this I don't know what the sound is. I apologize if you can hear it. Um, but this piece was very really kind of chaotic and wild for me in the studio, but I remember I was actually listening to Santigold while I was painting it, and I just remember just thrashing around a lot, and I just remember feeling very free and very open. I painted it actually just days before my 40th birthday, so that's probably where that sense of freedom and expansiveness and just kind of like wild abandon came from.
Well, you've been a wonderful guest today.
Thank
So
you.
rather than having an abrupt ending, I just want to thank you again for being here. If there's any final thing you want to share before we conclude today, please feel free.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I know there's all this doom and gloom talk. If you're an artist, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom talk about the art market, about it contracting, constricting, and the market is overcorrecting. And blah. Listen to me. I need you to listen to me. Just make your art. Just make your art and go where the love is, okay? Just go where the love is, make your art. The market is always going to do what the market is going to do. keep making your art because we need it. It is necessary. It is vital. Keep expressing and sharing what you have with the world. We need it. Don't worry as much. I know we all have bills to pay, but don't let that keep you. Don't let the doom and gloom keep you from sticking true to your North Star and making your work.
Thank you so much. The Gantt Center's goal is always to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you allows the Gantt to expand its reach and further develop programs like Open Air. Please lend your support to the Gantt Center by texting Give to Gantt, that's GIVE, the number 2, Gantt, to the number 91999. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for future programs and other video content updates. I want to thank you for joining us for today's Open Air, and we look forward to next month's with Chelsea Odofu. So thank you all. Thank you, A'Driane. It's been wonderful. Everyone have a safe evening. Till next time.